world.
Hello,
How are you?
sir. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, looking
All
forward to
right.
talking about cash flow today. One of my favorite
A-
topics.
Absolutely. And of course, we're broadcasting at an obscure time for our usual routine here. We're on Saturday morning. For those who are watching live, we're going to see this rather than Sunday morning, which is our habit. So, life's going to happen tomorrow. We're driving to Phoenix, Arizona,
Very
24
nice.
hours of driving over the next few
Wow.
days for a big trade show. And
Yeah,
so, anyway, so we're broadcasting today. So, hopefully, people can catch this by replay. And if you're
great.
watching with us live, of course, we'd love to have you chime in on this one. I think we got a good one today, man. This is
I
going
think
to be
so.
lively, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So the characteristics of well, what cash flow flows from your choices, I guess, your business choices, business
Yeah,
models, types of product you
yeah,
sell. It's pretty profound stuff. It's one of those things that on the surface I think looks uh, just doesn't exist for most people. They just don't see it that way at all. Or if they do, they go, "Oh, that's really boring. That's something for an MBA to worry about. I'm just trying to
hmm
make money." And the truth is, I think it's absolutely profound. I think it's
yeah,
incredibly important.
yeah.
And the lovely thing about getting cash flow cracked, amongst other things, I was thinking before we got on the shows, if somebody wants to reverse engineer your product or your marketing or your pictures, they could do that on, Shopify, on Google. They can see your search ranking, and on
hmm
Amazon, they can do the same. But nobody can really reverse engineer this sort of stuff easily either.
hmm
So it's
hmm
just a hidden engine behind your business exploding, I think. So it's very
Yeah,
cool stuff.
totally right. Yeah. So I titled this in the promotion of it, "The Shocking Cash Flow Traits
Nice.
of the Best E-commerce Companies," and they are shocking cash flow traits when we start to dig into these and understand how different e-commerce businesses operate. So anyway, so let's um let's tee this up properly and jump into the recording of our podcast. This
All
is
right.
going to be a fun one, though. We're going to have practical, tactical examples for
Mhm.
anyone watching this that you will be like, wait, wait, wait. How does this work? What? How do you do that? This is gonna. I think this will there's a little bit of magic here that we're going to talk through and explain and talk about, and
Yeah.
it's not magic as is all magic tricks. It's actually process that people have figured out that are crazy beneficial to businesses once they know what they're doing. And we're going to have some fun examples. And so anyway, so hang in there
Excellent.
with us. This
Just
won't be
before we
boring. It
record,
won't be
I want to make sure I look
university
professional
level.
as well. No, we're not going
Oh,
to university. We'll do practical.
Michael's
Sorry, I'm trying to look kind of vaguely Kempt here. Up together. Professionalism.
all right. You ready to kick this thing
Yeah,
off?
let's do this.
Okay, let's do it,
Are you
man.
ready to handle the camera angles?
Yeah,
Amazing.
sure.
Some e-commerce businesses have really interesting cash flow characteristics. It's a secret to most outsiders. In fact, it kind of appear like magic, but as Arthur C. Clarke said famously, any sufficiently advanced technology appears like magic, but it's not magic. It's just really well-engineered business with great cash flow characteristics. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the crazy reality that is possible in today's world, including having negative cash flow. In other words, getting your customers to pay you months or even years before you make the product, and many, many other exciting things. So, Jason, what are your thoughts on this topic? How come it's not insanely boring and everyone should turn off right now?
This is not insanely boring, so don't turn off right now. I'm going to talk to you about Starbucks and how they operate. I'm going to talk to you about other business models that we have firsthand knowledge in, that we use ourselves, that have crazy cash flow characteristics that basically mean you win really early and you win in interesting ways compared to other companies. And so don't tune this out, even though the word cash flow might sound technical or boring. I love this topic because I'm sort of a student of business and love to learn about what businesses do to win. And so I just, for example, since I mentioned Starbucks, I'll just kick things off with them. Um, Different businesses have different business models. And you all, of course, know that some of you do retail arbitrage that listen to this. Some of you do digital marketing, like for courses, that kind of thing. Some of you have drop shipping business. Some of you have made to order products that are handmade, handcrafted. All of these businesses have different characteristics. Well, Starbucks, I heard this recently, should be considered a bank. Have you heard this, Michael? That people are saying Starbucks should be considered a bank.
No, this is new to me. So, interesting thought.
This is
Yeah.
this is like what
Yep.
why would
Exactly. What?
Starbucks be considered a bank? And then the person said, well, as it happens, they put an app out there, and the app asks you to preload money onto your Starbucks app. Do you do this? Do you guys use the Starbucks app at all
I
for your
don't
purchases?
generally shop at Starbucks because I don't like their coffee very
Oh,
much.
brother.
They
Okay.
spend about 30 cents per coffee on the coffee. So
Okay.
that's one reason
Never
it's good.
mind, non-Starbucks drinker. Okay, I'll go back to full screen. You're out. Just kidding. Well, so here's how it works in practice. And my wife does this, and she. So I observed the behavior from her using the Starbucks app, and then once I heard this math, I was like, "Wait, what now?" So basically, if you get the Starbucks app, you preload it with your dollars from your debit card, and let's say you put $50 or $100 into the Starbucks app. You've given them your money, and they want you to use the app because then they'll give you rewards points, and you get a free brownie every like 9 years or whatever it is, whatever their redemption scheme is. And the person who was making this case that Starbucks should be treated as a bank is basically saying that in mass at scale, Starbucks is collecting. I don't know the real numbers. You could probably look in their, I don't know what, 10Q or something like that and find out their financial reporting, but they're collecting, let's just say, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm just making that number up, but they're collecting a massive amount of money from customers before they ever do anything. Now, those customers may or may not ever redeem that cash back as physical product, but the entire time that Starbucks owns it as cash on their on their balance sheet, in their business, they have free use of money. This is happening at scale inside that business, and it is a magic cash flow trick that is really, really interesting to understand. I mean, that makes Starbucks basically have float, which in a insurance business terms is free money or money that you get that you manage before you need to redeploy it to the customer. That characteristic is just one example for one company everyone knows, which Starbucks. But there are many, many such examples that we want to talk about in this podcast. And so I don't want to, sorry for, camping on that too long here as we kick things off, but I just want to pique people's interest and explain that this is real for a lot of businesses. And this understanding of how cash flows work is just it's a weird, weird factor in many businesses. So Michael, what are your thoughts on that? And even though you don't like Starbucks, do you like their
Yeah,
cash flow?
I'm not
Do
like
you like them being a bank?
anti-Starbucks. If I wanted to own something, in fact, I don't own Starbucks shares. It's one of those places where I'd want to own shares, just like with Coca-Cola. I think the drink sucks, but I think the business is amazing.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
yeah, of
Mm.
course, I'm talking to a man in Seattle here. So in Seattle, I guess you're either insanely proud of Starbucks or you're kind of far too hipster to drink anything like a Starbucks. So, but I would say, joking apart, it is an amazing insight. I didn't know that about Starbucks, and it reminds me of a couple of things. I mean, first of all, the obvious thing you said, you mentioned insurance float, and one reason why Warren Buffett was so obsessed with owning insurance companies is because they then created a float which drove the growth of other companies. The second example is obviously Amazon. We're all too familiar as third-party sellers having to wait for 14 days to get paid after we've made sales. That's not a coincidence. It means Amazon also runs a negative cash flow business, meaning that it actually has the money up front to then use to expand its operations. Now, here's why I think this matters so incredibly much. If you get paid up front, the simple insight is Vern Harnish's words: growth sucks cash. If you have a growing business, I guess pretty much all of us, it's kind of almost in America like a sacred mission, and for the rest of us, merely a wish to grow your business. Well, that sounds great on paper, but it normally means it's going to suck up any spare cash you have, and therefore having cash available up front, it just profoundly changes everything. I mean, for starters, it enables you to expand your business, and secondly, it means you might actually get paid, because otherwise you're going to be the shoe dog millionaire Phil Knight's position where you're basically broke until your company gets sold.
Yeah.
So those are the two sides of the downside and the upside why we got to get this cracked, I think, this cash flow stuff.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but basically what you're saying is if you can figure out a negative cash flow business element, your customers pay for your growth.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And for example, just go back to Starbucks for a second. Let's just say they took in $100 million in the app, and their daily output of that is, I don't know, let's say $1 million. So they have 100 days to use that money on a rolling basis.
Yeah.
They want to build a new store in your town. It costs them $3 million. No big deal.
Yeah.
They got $100 million sitting there to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the model that we're talking about. And that is a really interesting characteristic for their business, but many other businesses too. So there are other examples we want to talk about today. So Should we keep going here on the outline? Any other thoughts on this? Why do you like this topic generally? And what are your thoughts as it relates to sort of traditional Amazon sellers and all that kind of thing?
Well, as an aggregator, or somebody who works for an aggregator spoke to me recently about, and those are super financially savvy operators in the e-commerce space, right? Suddenly they're bringing
Mhm.
Wall Street levels of insight to, our little backwater relative to the big markets out there that Wall Street invests in. It's still quite small. And he was saying, listen, it's very simple. For example, and I think 2021, Amazon grew an average of about 38%, maybe 2020, but, recent times. If you're making a 30% margin, that means you're actually not going to be able to keep up with you're not going to even maintain your market share because your business can only grow about 30% organically, or however you figure out the maths of it. It's going to be below the level of market growth. So you then have to go and get yourself outside funding, or supplier credit, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the point is, the characteristics of the cash flow of your business will restrict the growth. And if it restricts the growth less than the markets you're in, if they're big, growing, fast growing markets, you're actually going to lose market share, which means your business is going to have all sorts of downsides to it. Like you can't
Mhm.
charge as much money, your visibility
Mhm.
is less, etc., etc. So I think the engine that enables growth is the cash flow characteristics of your business. And that's
Mhm.
why it's really, really important. So I guess one of the things we could talk about with is sourcing strategies. I mean, basically, as you put it very simply, who pays for the product? Are you paying it first? Is the customer paying you, the manufacturer, or even as you said, the government?
Mhm.
So I'm nicking
Mhm.
your thoughts here, but I think that's a really good way of putting it. I'd put it in more traditional terms like retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, wholesale.
Mhm.
But it comes to the same thing. So if you're doing private labeling, for example, as the business owner, you're going to pay for the stock months before you sell it in most
Yeah.
cases,
Yeah.
if you're shipping from abroad.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so what are
let's
your thoughts about who pays first?
yeah, let's apply some ideas just to that
Mm,
simple question: who pays for the product before
mm,
it's before the customer actually owns it or physically controls it. And retail arbitrageurs who use a cashback credit card to do their sourcing. Basically, Visa's paid for the product. You haven't paid for the product if you use your Visa card. You don't pay for 30 days. So Visa paid for the product. If you can sell it in 30 days, you have a negative cash flow business. You have money. Someone else is paying for the item, and then the customer pays for that, and then it's shipped out the door. So Visa is your basic 30-day float tool for retail arbitrage. That's very simplistic, right? The challenge with that business model is hard to go to scale, past maybe $500,000 or so. But there are very common other models too about answering the question who pays for the product. Very, very frequently, the manufacturer will give you some kind of manufacturer scheme of, paying, in essence, floating you the product or giving you some kind of a deal. Michael, you're probably more familiar with those kinds of scenarios
yeah.
than I am, but that's another common one for people who are manufacturing or working with a manufacturer, I should say. In China is very common. What are your thoughts on that specific element of who pays type thing?
I think it's absolutely critical to your business. To the previous point we're making, if you're in fast growing markets, if you can get your supplier to basically pay for the expansion of your business. So, in other words, organic growth of business, i.e., you're not taking external funding from investors, funding sources, debt, anything like that, factoring, all the other options. But you keep it within your business, but you're really not keeping it within your business because your supplier is advancing you the credit. Then that's incredibly powerful
And
for
that
several
happens?
reasons. It happens a lot actually, but it doesn't happen overnight. So if you're just getting started, you're not going to get that sort of deal
Mhm,
normally. But if you have a Chinese manufacturer, because the Communist Party is involved in everything and kind of normal rules don't apply, they're obsessed with getting export revenue, and they don't need to worry about profitability so much. Just the way I can understand it. I'm obviously not an expert in the Chinese financial system. It's pretty opaque to anyone anyway, but that seems to be how it works. Meaning, if you can get a deal with your manufacturer that you pay for the products when they land in the UK or the US, for example, then you've suddenly taken 2 months worth of working capital off the table, probably three, because
mhm,
it'll take a month to manufacture. Normally you put down a deposit before that of maybe 30% traditionally, depending on the size and the deal. And then you put 70% down 2 months before it lands. So if you can keep that money in your business for 2 or even 3 months longer, that profoundly changes
mhm,
everything, because it means you can probably assign half of the working capital or tie up half the money for that single product line, which you could use in different ways, but you could. have twice the number of product lines out there, for example, that you would have had just based on that one change. This is why it's exciting, because it changes everything.
Now, so that's in the scenario in which the manufacturer is paying for the product to be made in essence before you have to give it to the customer. And in many schemes, if the manufacturer cuts you that slack or gives you that grace, and then you pay them with a giant American Express card, or something like that, in payments, then you've got and then you use any kind of short-term loan tools or whatever, or financing tools, then you've got an additional extension of window. So these are cash flow strategies that are tried and true for people who operate in that model. Let's talk about different models, though. Extending the idea. The question again is, who pays for the product before the customer gets it? And sometimes you can have the customer pay for the product before you even make it. And that's not uncommon. In fact, made to order items are traditionally done that way. I mean, if you have somebody who says, I want this, here's the money, and you come back and give them whatever it is, the table that you made, or, the item, that's old, that's traditional, that's old, pre-internet thinking. So the customer can pay, certainly. Can you do that in the e-commerce business at scale? I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that, a lot of ways in which that can be done. When we started our business in 2007, 2008 on eBay with doing auctions, what we realized was we could auction a physical item and actually have it be sold. And if it's really fast to make, you just make it and send it after the auction ends, or after it sells. And if you control the manufacturer, it's just-in-time manufacturing, you could call it. That's what the big companies would call it, just-in-time manufacturing. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. Maybe it's, I don't know. Let's go check your legalities. But somebody pays you for something and you make it and send it, then there you have it. You haven't had to, do anything prior to having their money. So that's physical. There's also digital versions that we can talk about for digital businesses, which operate very, very differently as well. So, and then I want to talk about the government for a moment, but first, let me pause and just say, Michael, any thoughts on, having the customer pay, that kind of model?
Sure. So we've actually got one member of the mastermind in London. He's actually the most recent person to join us, I think, or last couple of people. He's actually got a print-on-demand business, which isn't just the usual merch by Amazon, although, I'm not saying that can't be a good business model, but he's actually got his own printing machines over in Bristol in the west of England. Even though he lives in London, he pops over once a week to visit his manufacturers all the way, about 100 miles away. And they produce stuff on demand for Amazon, eBay, and Etsy. And that's a, thriving business. It's taken a lot of work, and there's quite a lot of capital tied up. I think one of his printing machines is £60,000 or whatever, $80,000 worth. So it's not a casual decision, and he's grown into it over time. But that is exactly that thing. So you get paid up front. If you're on Amazon, of course, the customer pays, then you make it, and then you ship it to them, or Amazon ships it, depending on how you do it. And then, of course, Amazon pays you later. On Etsy, I'm not sure what the sort of characteristics are of that transaction, but in essence, it is the customer paying first. Which is quite different from the private label kind of business model where most people are in that group are operating.
Yeah. And the benefit there of customer paying first is complete and total risk mitigation. The only thing that can happen negatively is they ask for a refund, or they don't like the product, they give you a bad review, that kind of thing. But it is, if you know that you don't have to make something prior because you don't know how much it's going to be sold or whatever, it does eliminate that risk. So it's interesting. Do you agree with that, or thoughts on that?
Yeah, just basically, you're right. It eliminates the risk of buying something that people don't want to, buy themselves, which is very, very big. So it does eliminate that risk. The only thing I'd say is returns. It depends on the percentage of that. In certain categories like clothing, we've got one of the members of the mastermind. He's a clothing manufacturer and retailer, and that can be big return rates. Like in Germany, clothing traditionally is around about 40% return rate on Amazon. So returns can become big in certain categories, but mostly it's not too bad. And the other thing is, of course, in his model, if he's printing on, some kind of plastic widgets imported from China, you've got to import the widgets by the tens of thousands. And then you've got to invest in the machines. But over time, so you're broadly speaking, you're right. It reduces risk a great deal. certainly a lot better than ordering, 1,000
Mm-hmm.
units of some expensive thing from China. It takes 3 months to hit you, and then you try and sell it on Amazon and it doesn't sell. That's a big risk for sure that you've eliminated.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so so that's interesting, and people obviously have heard of the print-on-demand industry.
Mm,
Whether they can have that be an aspect of their business or not is a different question, but it is
mm,
interesting to think about and look into if it's
mm,
something that's possible. I want to talk about another common example that is also a Seattle area business. Wow, this is so interesting. Um, and that's the Costco model, membership model. And I think e-commerce operators have a tremendous opportunity to bolt on membership models to their existing business. And we've done this in our own business, and we have coaching clients that we help implement this strategy. So I know of what I speak in a small way compared to Costco, but they've done this at ginormous scale and built the model around this idea. And here is the idea: create a membership program that the members pay you for upfront, and then they get the benefits over time. And obviously, Amazon Prime is an example of that in the digital, e-commerce world. But Costco was the is kind of originator of this membership club idea. In fact, Jim Sinegal, the founder, learned from a guy named Saul Price. I've had the chance to hear Jim speak locally here, and it was a fun evening where we interacted and had Q&A time. And the guy is just a genius at this stuff. And this model, in basic terms, is you set up a membership program with a list of benefits. People give you the money, and then you deliver on the outcomes. Now, in Costco's scenario, um, they sell their items at, I understand it, pretty close to break even. They don't make money on their the groceries or the consumer items they sell. They in totality make their money on the membership. Um, Amazon Prime, I think, has similar characteristics where Amazon realized that the money is in the membership and there's real power there. Now, for a normal everyday business that has an item it's selling to, like a traditionally manufactured item, the question is there any context in which a membership program would make sense for your customers? Maybe you can give them something like free shipping. Maybe you can give them something like, I mean, go down the list of Amazon's benefits, Amazon Prime's benefits. Maybe you can give them early access to items. Maybe you can give them private collections that only they can shop from. Maybe you can give them standing discount. Maybe you can give them, I don't know, something else, a sign up benefit or some kind of bonus. Um, the list of potential benefits is endless. And to the extent they're digital, they're free after you create them. But, this is the interesting model here with memberships. And I know a lot of people who have e-commerce operation who are selling on Amazon and trying to sell on Shopify haven't taken the next logical extension, which is once you sell on Shopify, you can also change your business model. And if you bolt on membership on top of a Shopify site, it is dumping cash up front that you didn't have any other current obligation for, right in your balance sheet, right? The cash comes in, then you've got this ongoing obligation. um, these models uh, revolutionize your business. And so that's just another example of membership. I don't know, Michael, if you're in
Well,
memberships that you think about, well, or you've got examples
yeah.
that you like for
S-
this category. What are
So
your
much
thoughts?
to say about this. I think this incredible power. The first thing I want to just underline what you just said, that if you're moving off Amazon or somewhat not off, but bolting on Shopify on top of an Amazon focused business, that is not just another version of the same thing. As you just said, it has profoundly different characteristics if you
Yeah,
choose it to. And I
yeah.
think the subscription thing's really incredibly important. There's a book called The Automatic Customer. Can't remember who it's by. We'll put it in the show
Hmm.
notes
Hmm.
at theecommerceleader.com if you're listening. But that tells you basically he's a very sophisticated business thinker and operator. I think the guy who wrote that.
Hmm.
And it tells you that a business with recurring revenue is much more valuable. It will sort of go for sort of 3 or 4 times
Hmm.
the profit level that an
Hmm.
average non-recurring revenue business will go for.
Hmm.
So that tells you that it's incredibly powerful. powerful thing to do. So why should you do it? Because you could sell it for, 10 times profits instead of 5 times profits, or 15 times, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
The main metric that drives that is retention rate, or the churn rate, the opposite, when people are leaving. And
Yeah.
that's why I think I'm an Amazon Prime user, and primarily I use it for their videos. They've been created an entire sort of mini Hollywood studio just to keep me engaged in Prime, because they know how
Exactly.
incredibly powerful that is. That
Exactly.
shows these people are not stupid. This shows how powerful this is, and how much money and effort you should put into keeping people in your world forever and ever.
Okay, wait, think about this. People who sign up for Amazon Prime and don't even shop on Amazon for any products, they
Yeah.
just like the movies
It's
that are on
basically
the.
Netflix. My favorite usage of Prime is Netflix.
Mhm,
My wife is the one who buys
mhm.
crazy amounts of stuff on my Amazon Prime account, because I keep getting the emails and like, oh,
Yeah,
you've ordered, 10 sets of earrings. I'm like, really? Ah, okay, my wife did. So I got it.
yeah,
So we have different uses of it. I use
yeah.
Amazon Prime primarily as my free Netflix. But yeah,
But
that just
yeah,
goes to show. I mean, that's kind of crazy. But the other thing is, the there's, if you want to get amazing um uptake of this stuff, there's a very, very good book which is very broad marketing wisdom by a guy called Alex Hormozy. It's free if you get the Audible version or the Kindle version. It's called $100 Million Offers, and
yeah.
I've been reading this, and I've just ordered the paperback version so I can go and
It's
underline everything, because it's
so
just such a
good.
great book. Yeah,
It's
amazing
the
book.
it is so good. You do the same thing that you just described. You listen to it or whatever, and then you want a second version of it. You want to get the
Yeah.
paperback or whatever. It's that good of a book. $100 million offers.
Yeah, so if you want to
Yes,
figure out a
yes,
ways to get people,
yeah,
falling over themselves to subscribe and to
hmm,
keep them subscribed, that's a very good
yeah,
starting point. So have you got another example? So obviously you're very experienced in all this membership and
yeah.
type model.
Well, the membership one is one I'm a huge, believer in. Created Sewing with Cinnamon as our membership example. I didn't even mention that a moment ago, but yeah, we have something like 1,100 people in Sewing with Cinnamon. Her signature program. She streams now on all the platforms as well, so you can find Sewing with Cinnamon on Apple TV and Roku and Amazon Fire TV device and
Cool.
all of the platforms. She has a membership program that is exactly like the Prime Video that you're describing, or Netflix.
Mm,
So for video creators, you can do that. But there's another whole example that's very common and very obvious that I want to mention,
mm,
and that's gift cards. If this is an example of a negative cash flow business scenario. So, and let me just continue the thought here. If you're a big seller on Amazon and then you want to start selling on your own Shopify site, and you don't set up membership, you're leaving cash flow models on the table that would be beneficial. And if you
mm,
don't set up gift cards, you're leaving cash flow models that are beneficial that on the table, or not, not installing them. The customers will buy gift cards for almost
right.
any product or category. Customers will, and this is important. Customers will buy a gift card for someone. They'll give it to that person. The assumption that that person will use that gift card is an assumption. The cash is in your bank account. The gift card is digital, theoretical ish to the prospective new person. You will then wait for that person to redeem the gift card. If and when they do, you give them the product. But if they don't, it's free money. And the gift card industry knows this. There's redemption rates that are known quantities. It's something in the 75% range or 70% range or something last I heard, but I could be wrong about the specifics, but you can geek out over that if you want on your own as you're researching this. But the idea is, on a Shopify site, it's very simple to set up gift cards. You can make them look nice, and it looks like something that's giftable. And if you're in any kind of industry or business that has in any way that logic to it, you should be doing that. It is really beneficial to your business, and it's not new thinking. I mean, those have been around for, I don't even know how long, 30, 40 years or whatever it is. But they definitely relate to e-commerce operators. And for the folks who we work with, that's one of the things we talk to them about in our coaching and consulting is, what's your gift card strategy? And a lot of people were like, what now? I'm like, oh, let me describe how this works for you. It's like, you know, because it's the same thing mathematically. If you said, you sell 100, you sell 100 products, but you only have to ship 70 of them. Like, how good did that deal be? And that's the same math. So think through that. And Michael, I don't know if you have any thoughts or ideas for gift cards, or if you've thought through that with other people before, but it's fun
No,
stuff.
never thought about it, but it makes absolute sense. I guess it's like the gym industry. They sell the idea of gym membership, and you certainly have the right to access a gym, but most people don't. And then, they join in
Mhm.
January and give up in April when they admit to themselves they're not going to go. And for that sort of period of time, they've got free cash coming in, right? So
Mhm.
very, very interesting indeed. And as you put it, sell 100 products, ship 70. That's certainly going to incredibly
Is
improve
that
your
crazy?
margins. No, that's amazing.
That's crazy cash flow tricks.
Yeah, that's
Like,
amazing, man. Yeah.
but it's not. There's nothing in that that's wrong, uncool,
No, not
incorrect.
at all.
It's just a
Yeah.
function of how gift cards work.
Yeah.
And if you
Amazing.
understand that and you lean into it, then you benefit from that knowledge. No issue there. It's just how it works. So,
Yeah.
well, these are fun examples. Any other
Yeah.
examples, or where else do you want to take the conversation today?
Well, I guess I want to make sure that I bring it, sort of keep it doable for those people that I know that I work with, or hopefully your potential clients or clients that are listening as well. One thing is sourcing location. I mean, whilst it is very cool if you can find a Chinese manufacturer who will, give you credit such that you don't have to pay until the goods land on your shores,
Hmm.
that's great. That's not easy to achieve. Whereas if you just if you look through the lens of cash flow characteristics, there's a better way of putting it, at everything you do, one of the reasons for changing sourcing location has nothing to do with anything else except how quickly you turn your money around. So if you source in the same state as you sell stuff, I mean, that would be unusual for e-commerce. You can't normally control the state, but if you source in the UK, a fairly small country, to sell in the UK, then you're going to generally find that you put your money down and you get the traveling around of stock is going to be so much quicker that it affects the cash flow characteristics. And people think of it as a stock management tool, which it is. But the flip side of that is a cash flow management tool. So I
Hmm.
really think that I would be quite prepared quite often to sacrifice the gross margin, at least initially, certainly initially, maybe forever, in
Hmm.
response for a great cash flow characteristics, because it's actually the cash that enables growth. If you have no free cash flow, i.e., you've got no profit either, then that doesn't work, of course. But I would accept a slight reduction in the profit margin, which is a
Hmm.
theoretical construct by an accountant, in
Hmm.
response to better cash flow characteristics. So,
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it these days.
No, that's interesting. I mean, for physical product sellers, then obviously that sourcing location is central to the cash flow strategies. Yeah. And there's just so many angles on this. That's what's interesting about it. It's not
Yeah.
a one trick pony. There's just so many interesting angles. So yeah.
So tell me about product types. Obviously, you're an expert in digital products. Tell me about your thoughts about the cash flow characteristics of those.
Well, digital products are fascinating as well. In as it relates to cash flow, sure. There's a lot of nuance there, and even saying digital products, that's a whole collection of probably 10 different models. But just for funsies, let's just choose one example. Let's say it's a digital product that's a Udemy course. I'm just about to go for 40,000 students on Udemy, and that's super cool. So digital product on Udemy. So pretty straightforward. Udemy is a platform for knowledge, teaching and sharing your knowledge. You create a course, you upload it, and then they pay you as they make sales. So the hard costs are front loaded. You have the time and energy and expense of creating the item, and that's true for the digital product industry. And that could be software, that could be a digitally downloaded item like a Kindle book or a PDF you sell on your website. I do all of those things, and so they all work the same way. If you look at the meta level, the macro level, and that is your hard costs and expense are upfront, and so the maker expense. And the thing you're arbitraging there is you're arbitraging the ROI, or you're guesstimating about the ROI. When I created my course on Udemy, my first one, Shopify Power, I didn't know it would do so well. So I had to upfront spend time and money and effort making the course itself. So let's just say in my time, let's just say I paid myself $50 an hour, and it took me whatever 10 hours. It was $500 that it cost me. That's not real, but whatever. I mean, I just say $500 is what the cost was. I had no idea whether I'd make $500 back or how long it would take for me to make $500 back. Those are the only questions involved in the sales of digital items. That's true for software or any of it. So, but then what happens quickly is if you strike on, in baseball terms, a single or a double or a triple or home run, let's just say you pay yourself back in the first month. So you have 100% return on your investment in the first month. In month 2, 3, and beyond, if you're not operating the platform upon which those sales occur, uh, and if there's not any ongoing maintenance cost or other costs, then it's free cash flow back to you, and you paid yourself back, and it's all free cash flow. Now, in the software industry, there's server costs, there's dev costs, there's ongoing costs. So software, there is an extensive ongoing cost structure. But in other things, like a PDF book that you sell on Kindle, there is no ongoing cost structure unless you want to update it at some point. And if you put that Kindle book out there into the universe and you've done it in such a way that it really tracks people and you've hit on a hot topic, and it pays you back for your time and initial setup effort, in the first month, then you could have a rocket ride. And that those cash flow dynamics are just very interesting because it creates a publisher business very quickly. As soon as you have one or two of those things happen, you then realize you're in an industry that's like you're the publisher, and being a publisher is a very, very different, business model. And so that's the way it works. And there's all kinds of nuance there and fun topics and rabbit trails to go into. But digital goods is fascinating. My best suggestion is read "Free: The Future of a Radical Price" by Chris Anderson, and then his other book, "The Long Tail." Those are old now, but they are the foundational books upon which many people have built incredibly good e-commerce businesses on these principles. So there you have it.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you're certainly the expert in this stuff. I mean, obviously, I guess still Udemy's top e-commerce instructor with 40,000 students and certainly tons and
Well,
tons of Kindle books out there.
I'm up there, but I'm not the top anymore. There's other courses for Shopify. There's one about how to build a Shopify business for developers that's beating my Shopify Power course, and there are others too now. So, but nonetheless, it's an honor to have done it. I think that in total has like 10 courses on Udemy now, and that was just sort of a side hustle gig that just went
Nice.
well, and I kind of had the right timing. That's the way it works on Udemy. Just as a side note, if you want to teach,
Hmm.
and this is true for publishing in general too. My first book that was published by McGraw Hill was called Pinterest Power, and I started it as a blog in 2011, marketingonpinterest.com. And the thing that I stumbled into was I was in the right time. There was an epoch of time in which I could do something and have it get traction. It was the right moment culturally for me to write about marketing on Pinterest. And McGraw Hill noted that, and other publishers were all competing to get a book out. And so Pinterest Power came out. On Udemy, the Shopify course that I put out 6-7 years ago was just before Shopify got super crazy hot. And so there is timing for such things in the publishing world. It's a lot about timing and reading the society and what's going to be trendy and what's not. If you're good at it, you're multimillionaire. And if you're marginal at it, you'll make a living. But
Yeah.
you'll
Okay.
learn as you go, and that's the fun part. So
Yeah, and I guess publishing has traditionally been a really difficult industry because you have to pay your authors, advances and try and read what's coming. And I guess we have an opportunity to be part of that same industry, but without having to pay for expensive offices in
mhm.
New York or London or what have you. So
Yeah,
certainly
that's right.
exciting opportunity. I'm forever begging. I had discussions over a couple of beers the other day with the mastermind members, basically begging one of them who's in the supplements area to go and get somebody to write a book for him because he's certainly not a supplements expert. I said, look, London is absolutely full of scientists at top universities.
Hmm.
There's no
Hmm.
reason not to. Very interesting. Now, the other thing that strikes me when it comes to cash flow characteristics, you've mentioned already traffic channels. So you've mentioned Kindle books, obviously sold on Amazon, and you mentioned Udemy, which is another marketplace, a third-party marketplace, and you mentioned Shopify, which obviously you're the expert on and is your own store. So presumably that has a big effect on the cash flow characteristics as well. Now you have a lot of experience of all of those different entities. What are your thoughts on how that affects cash flow? It's sort of for
Well,
marketplace
yeah,
own site to start with.
it is very, very interesting. If you own your own Shopify site and you have the payment gateways set up to manage, then you get the sales transactions and data directly unintermediated. A lot of internet marketing is about intermediation or disintermediation, meaning do you create a layer of bureaucracy that you benefit from, or do you remove a layer of bureaucracy that you benefit from? And ideally, in a perfect world, you remove layers of bureaucracy and you benefit from that, and customers benefit from that. So that's like super high level idea. But anyway, as it relates to payment gateways and cash flows and that kind of thing on marketplaces, just simple example. Let's say you sell $100 item on your Shopify site, and um, someone pays through your Shopify site, you get payment depending on how they pay. But let's just say they check out with PayPal, you get payment immediately. You get the money right then. Let's say you sell the $100 item through Amazon, and you're a relatively new Amazon seller. Is it 14-day period before you get any payment,
Yeah,
Michael?
that's normally what you
Yeah,
have to
some
wait.
people are grandfathered into like a shorter duration, I think, but
Can
yeah,
be. It's unusual. Yeah, it's
yeah.
possible.
So, but 14 days later, you get the money. Well, that's not as good. I mean, that's a long time in when you're thinking about this kind of stuff. So, and there are other platforms. So here's it even to extend it even further. Let's just say it was a book that you're selling. Um, and let's say that book is sold by a distributor, like in my case, McGraw Hill sells my book at Barnes and Noble. So Barnes and Noble takes the money from the customer for my book. It's my book. But Barnes and Noble gives the money to McGraw Hill, my publisher. Then my publisher gives it to my agent, who runs they collect all the money and then disperse it to their writers. And then my agent cuts me a check. That sequence of events is I get paid twice a year. So it doesn't matter if the sales happen every single day, which they do. I get paid twice a year. So that's an example of, for my business, for cash flow, that's very, very different characteristic
Yeah,
than
yeah,
if I'm selling it on ClickFunnels or on Shopify or my own site, whatever, and I get instant payment. Those extremes are all just objects of uh, note and importance depending on how you rig up your system.
mm,
And they're all relatively in the same industry, which is publishing.
yeah. Interesting,
So
isn't it?
those are the dynamics that you have to think through, and it's endlessly fascinating to me. I don't know how people can understand this as boring. To me, if you're in business, this is what it's all about: is the great game of rigging these things up to be, to work. It's like,
Yeah,
can you make this work? So anyway, there you go.
I'm absolutely with you. I think that let's put it this way: if nothing else, if what people take away from this episode, I hope is a new lens through which to look at everything in your business. So, for example, a book is not just a book. You just outlined 3 different ways in which books can have completely different cash flow characteristics for the person
Hmm.
who,
Hmm.
the author. If you're also in the role of publisher or not, if you're in the role of, the marketplace participant versus having your own, mini marketplace of books, I suppose. Yeah, so I think the sales channel is not necessarily the whole story. The product type is not necessarily the whole story. Because when you
Hmm.
put the whole thing in together and you look at the characteristics, and I love your very, very simple question, like who's paying first? Is it you?
Hmm.
Is it your customer? Is it the marketplace?
Yeah.
That's a really, really, really great, simple question to go and
Yeah.
ask of every part of your business. And, when you're marketing, when do I pay? When do I get paid? For
Hmm.
example, if you run Facebook ads to something, when do you get paid, and when do you pay Facebook? If it's on a credit card,
Hmm.
and Facebook lets you wait 14 days, whatever it is these days, maybe you can pay 45 days after you've run the ad, in which case, when do you get paid by your customers, and how long does your payment processor take to pay you? And Stripe delays everything by a few days, right? Unfortunately, for example. So these are really critical questions. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, totally, totally. It's so fun. I mean, there's so many examples. It's just like,
Yeah,
where do we stop? But
it is.
yeah, yeah. You want me
Wow.
to do another one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, here's another one that people will be very familiar with if they're, internet marketers and online sellers. And that's Russell Brunson's model for ClickFunnels. And you've maybe heard him talk about this, but I'll kind of explain what I've heard him mention before. His ClickFunnels software is one of the fastest growing SaaS businesses on the internet. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically a tool for building websites. And I remember a conversation he relayed. It might be in Expert Secrets, but he talked about the fact that um, venture capitalists wanted to come and, try to give him money for his business. And the first question they ask is, what's your cost of acquisition? How much do you pay to get a new customer? And he said, we don't pay for new customers. They pay us. Like, it's negative cash flow. I mean, we get the money first. And they were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he said, well, we use our tool. We use the tool we built called ClickFunnels. And we give away something like a book. And then we, in ClickFunnels, have something called an order bump or an upsell. And then as people get the free book, then they'll add in the order bump for another like $9 or something like that. And then they'll take the one-time offer that's right in that, software checkout process. And maybe that's $99. So that customer is given whatever that was, $106 or whatever I said. And they advertise to find a customer that maybe takes them $20 to find a customer. And the customer instantly gives them the $108 right in the transaction when they're signing up for the software. That's an example of a negative cash flow business where, to your point previously, Michael, ClickFunnels growth was fueled by its customers. They paid for them to do all that work because he rigged it up in such a way that the customer's acquisition was a net positive thing. And if you have a business like that, the only question in your mind is, how can I get more of these? How do I get more of them? And if the average, the cost of acquisition for your average customer is really kind of like those real numbers, you back up the dump truck in terms of spending money to acquire customers. You could spend $20, you could spend $50, you could spend $99. You spend any amount you want to acquire a customer if they're giving you $108. Up to $108. So that ClickFunnels model is endlessly fascinating to me as well. And he's created a massive business out of it. And it's because of the cash flow characteristics that he's described. And he's, publicly explained to people. Customers are thrilled with ClickFunnels. I love ClickFunnels. We do a lot of sales through ClickFunnels as a software tool. And so anyway, that's another example of just, how this kind of cash flow characteristic can be so interesting to look at and explain. Yeah.
And I think the last thing I'd like to just say is, don't act like ClickFunnels if you're not. You got to engineer your way to it. And there's a famous example of Hewlett Packard, which is a manufacturing company and huge. So it's not a great, clean e-commerce small business example, I'm afraid. But they basically hired in a really fantastic CFO, chief financial officer, and he worked overtime to change it from a very, very cash intensive, working capital intensive business where hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars were tied up for a long time, to be negative cash flow. In other words, they got paid first, and it took them a long time and a lot of work, and they worked through the entire business to the point of seeing it as a lens through it to see everything. They re-engineered the entire business to serve this cash flow characteristics. And of course, what it meant was that they could then grow the business based on organic cash flow as much bigger risk reduction, much more efficient, much better in every way. So if a VC comes to those guys, or indeed the stock markets look at that and they think this is such an attractive business to invest in as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is you can go from very working capital intensive towards a much more positive cash flow model over time. But don't act like you've done it already, because you'll go broke. That's all I would say.
No, these are all, to your point, these are all refinements if you're already rolling. These are all, kind of opportunities for enhancement or improvement. And a logical extension of your current model is obviously what we're talking about for people who have a going concern. If you're just starting out in the world, and you want to think about all of these things to some degree, and then stick your toe in the water somehow, and then start to learn as you go. But I totally agree. Obviously, you have to build from where you're at and modify what you've got, and then to the extent that you can make these little adjustments, as they say, big doors swing on little hinges. And these minor adjustments. I mean, imagine, for example, if somebody's selling, let's just say, you're doing $50,000 or $100,000 a month through a Shopify site, but you don't have a membership program, and you could, or you don't have a gift card system, or you could, or you don't have a digital product, but you could. Those three things alone will radically transform your cash flow characteristics in your business if you implement them in this year. And that's not an abstraction that's impossible. Those are just work a day kind of projects. Just set it up, figure it out, get it installed, market it properly, and see what happens to your business financials.
And just to give us a Amazon/physical product focus example, even more mundane, if you go and negotiate with your suppliers, if you've been buying stuff from them in large amounts for a while, you may be pleasantly surprised at what you can find, or you may find that they refuse to give you extra credit, in which case I would risk all the pain and effort. Yes, I am asking you to do this, potentially go to a new supplier, because it isn't just about quality control, although that obviously matters. It isn't just about reliability, although it's critical. It isn't just about price and unit economics, although it's obviously critical. It is about the cash flow characteristics. I would, to that extent, this isn't just me saying this, the people who work for the aggregators who work with businesses and acquire these businesses are saying the same stuff to me as well. So it is just, again, re-engineering the finances changes everything about the business. So you have to be willing to go and do that work, which is less kind of fun and sexy than adding a membership program to a Shopify site. That sounds a lot more fun and creative to me. But difficult conversations around credit arrangements are nevertheless really also important stuff as well.
Well, as a takeaway, then your example is great. So it's in summation of that, if you're an Amazon seller that sells physical product and you literally implemented a better deal with your manufacturer this year, an implementation of a short-term credit card scheme or cashback, rewards credit card, if you don't use one of those are low-hanging fruit items as well on the Amazon physical product seller side. Many such tactics and strategies exist regardless of your business model. I mean, every business model has options for optimization, and that's the exciting part of all of this. So, love
Well,
it.
look, great conversation, man. I really enjoyed today because I think there's tons of stuff that people could go and do, within the next few months actually to transform their business, which is really exciting. So that we're obviously becoming the cash flow nerds here, and I hope we've, got other people with the enthusiasm that we both seem to have for this topic. Very cool to hear about your, what you're doing in your businesses, is where you run so many different business models. Just the last thing to say, I suppose, to anyone watching or listening is just don't forget to check us out. A couple of places in the Call-In app these days. So getting very, very popular. We've got the Call-In show with Chris Green and Kyle Hamer, as well as Jason and myself on every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, or 4 p.m. UK time. And of course, we're here on Sundays live normally on basically all the social media channels you can shake a stick at, and on podcast apps near you. So on Spotify, I believe you can now also give a love of some kind. So don't forget to do that, and don't forget to subscribe so that we can keep giving you the guidance to make the best e-commerce leader you can be.
Love it, man. Great show. Just one tiny takeaway for me. I'm going to add this episode to our growing content library for the Profit Habits workshop. If y'all didn't take advantage of the Profit Habits workshop we did last fall, and it piques your interest, it's basically 17 highly profitable habits of successful business owners, and it's a booklet and workbook and a bunch of videos and all that. I got to take another whack at this in 2022, and so I am going to revise and expand it. This conversation fits in it so perfectly. And so look for that, this next 6 months or so. And next time we do Profit Habits Workshop, be sure to jump into it, because this would just be one of 17, there's actually 17 others. So this would be the 18th idea that might be shared in that context. And so anyway, love it, man. As always, this is an honor to do with you every week. And it's really a joy to see people like the content on Call-In app when we broadcast there, and also on Spotify and Apple Player and all. So thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, always a pleasure, and always educational as well.
Yep. Okay. Bye, everybody. We're going to end it here. Thanks for hanging out with us this Saturday morning, and appreciate your enthusiasm for the show. If you have questions as you watch this video in the groups that we've broadcasted into, feel free to ask them underneath the show, and we'll try to monitor those. So cool. All right. See you, buddy.